I want to walk you guys through exactly how I landed a six-figure job right out of college because I'm not here to gatekeep anything. And I'd rather just be real with y'all instead of pretending this was not some crazy stroke of luck. And I think being honest about this is way more useful for you if you're trying to figure out your own path or do something similar to what I've done. So, in this video, I'm going to break down why I chose to go to college, why I specifically got my degree in engineering, how I approached networking and getting internships, how I use those internships to build leverage, and how being willing to move and staying flexible opened up way more opportunities than I could have ever imagined. I'm also going to give my opinion about situations where college might not be the best move, and I'll give you my honest perspective on where I think the job market is heading over the next decade so you can think about this stuff a little bit more strategically. Let's jump into it. I went to college out of state, and I knew going into it that it was going to cost me a solid chunk of money. So I didn't take the decision lightly, and I definitely didn't look at college as just this 4-year experience to quote unquote figure things out. I looked at college like an investment that I was going to have to justify with my future self. I didn't have some perfectly mapped out master plan when I showed up on day one, but I did know one thing pretty early on, and that was that I wanted a degree that actually translated into a high paying job. Because I had already seen way too many people take on a ton of debt for degrees that didn't really give them a strong paying job right out of school. And these people were struggling financially. And that's a really tough hole to climb out of in your early 20s. And look, if you want to go chase something you're passionate about, I'm not here to tell you not to do that. But you have to go into it with your eyes open and understand the trade offs. Because the cost of college is real, and it's actually gotten so out of hand at this point, and where you want to live after graduation certainly matters. Whether that's a big city or somewhere more rural, what those jobs will actually pay you. All of this directly impacts your financial situation, whether you want to admit it or not. You've got to be honest with yourself and ask these tougher questions up front instead of just going through the motions. Because if you treat college like a 4-year party and don't really think about the outcome, there's a very real chance you're going to wake up after graduation with a fuck ton of debt, no clear direction, and a pretty stressful financial situation on your hands. So when I looked at all that, I made a very clear decision to go into electrical engineering because it had a strong future job demand, it had strong pay right out of school, and the long-term upside based on how the world is currently evolving. I still think to this day it's one of the best, if not the best, college degrees you can choose if your goal is to maximize your income early in your career. And I'll be honest, this might be a bit of a hot take, but I do think a lot of college degrees are massively overpriced and borderline a scam for what these degrees actually give you in return. And with the way things are trending, especially with AI potentially wiping out, let's say, a chunk of all entry level white collar jobs, you really have to ask yourself if going into debt for certain college degrees even makes sense anymore. Because for a lot of people, it probably doesn't make sense. So I knew I was going to have $60,000 in student loans that I needed to figure out what to do with since I decided to go out of state for college. I was very thankful and fortunate for my parents to cover close to half of my college tuition. And for the other half, I took out student loans to become an RA for my sophomore year. I did internships in the summer. I worked during the school year to pay for my living expenses. Having to work through college taught me a lot of time management and discipline that has translated well into my professional career. I was very aware I was going to have to deal with the second I graduated all this debt, so I was trying to be as responsible as I could about how I handled my money while I was still in school. Becoming an RA my sophomore year really helped cut down on housing costs. I also worked internships during the summers to bring in income and gain engineering experience. I then working during the school year to cover my day-to-day expenses so I wasn't just adding more and more onto that debt. And honestly, having to juggle all of being a full-time student and working was one of the best things that could have happened to me because it forced me to get very good at managing my time, staying disciplined, and prioritizing what actually mattered. And those are the same skills that translate directly into my professional role as a project manager. I didn't have the option to just coast or waste time because there was always something that needed to get done. And that pressure, in a good way, has built a level of structure and accountability that helped me develop into a good engineer today. So once I chose engineering, I knew pretty quickly that none of this was going to matter if I couldn't actually get my foot in the door and land a job. Internships are the real world experience that separates you from a lot of your peers who might have similar grades, but nothing to show for outside of the classroom. And this is where a lot of engineers struggle because you can't just sit there behind a computer and expect opportunities to come fall right into your lap. You have to be willing to be social. You got to talk to people. You got to put yourself out there, even if it feels uncomfortable. I've actually gone back with my current employer to recruit at colleges, and I can tell you firsthand, we're not just looking for the smartest person in the room. We're looking for someone who's confident, someone who's coachable, and someone who's genuinely eager to work. And all those come across way more in how you carry yourself rather than just the numbers and what's displayed on your resume. You've got to find that internal drive where you actually want it because you are going to hear no way more than you hear the yeses, especially early on when you're an underclassman and you don't have much experience yet. But that's part of the process. And the way you build confidence is by putting yourself in those situations over and over again. Going up to companies at career fairs and learning how to communicate your value, just getting those reps in. Do a little bit of homework on the companies you're interested in so you can speak intelligently. You got to clean up your resume so it stands out, and then put yourself in the best possible position for someone to take a chance on you. It can really be a numbers game, and you can't let a handful of rejections throw you off your track. And don't be afraid to use your network either, because there's a lot more of who do you know involved rather than people like to admit. So if you have connections, use them without feeling guilty. For me personally, I did not have some of these built in advantages or connections. So I had to step out of my comfort zone pretty early on. I took my first internship in a city that I had never lived in before, and I did work that leaned a bit more into the blue collar side than what most people would picture for engineering. And that was a tough and really rewarding experience that helped me grow up quickly and build confidence. After that, I improved my GPA. I went back to the career fair with a little bit more experience under my belt and landed a solid internship with an oil and gas company. I then doubled down by taking another risk and moving across the country again, even taking time off school to do a longer co op with this company. That eventually turned into another internship with them and then a full time offer. And then when I look back at what actually made me stand out, it was that I was willing to move, I was willing to take whatever opportunity I could to get that experience, and I put real effort into improving my people skills so I could network efficiently. All of that stacked together is what led me to landing a six-figure job right out of college. Not by luck, but by putting in the work and betting on myself. Now, with all that being said, I do think there are very real financial consequences that come with choosing a major that statistically does not lead to a high paying job right out of college. And I'm not saying that to discourage you again from going after something that you enjoy, but I do want you to go into that decision fully aware of what you're signing up for. Because the cost of college today is not what it used to be, and the margin for error is a lot smaller than people realize. The old formula that has worked for decades, that old formula being go get a degree, stay loyal to one company, work your way up, retire with a pension, afford a house, that formula has changed for us, especially for Gen Z. And pretending like it isn't is how people end up being stuck. That's a big reason why I leaned so heavily into engineering, because it's one of those fields that still has strong demand, really strong pay, and a relatively clear return on your college investment. The other thing I want to point out is what's so fucked today is that you can do everything that I laid out for you in this video and still randomly get laid off on a Monday because companies want to replace you with AI. So yeah, that sounds really scary. I'm kind of terrified too. But what can you do about that? Here's what I'm doing, and what I recommend everyone else do is figure out a way to separate yourself from the pack at work. And also, you have to figure out ways how to create income streams that are not directly tied to your 9 to 5. Getting a high paying college degree and an entry level job is step one, but step two is then advancing your career and diversifying your earning potential. I made a whole video about side hustles that I'm doing, that being flying drones, using Rover to dog sit other people's dogs, and building up this YouTube channel. Now, if you also sharpen up your personable skills along with a high paying degree and a few side hustles, you are going to make yourself so much more valuable and much harder for your company to lay you off if they have a choice between you and Billy Bob Joe who's sitting next to you. With how fast companies are implementing AI and how fast companies are today to just lay off employees to cut costs, these steps that I just talked about are more critical for our generation than ever before. Companies today are a whole lot more transactional than they used to be. They will cut jobs and lay off people without thinking twice. I just saw on my Instagram feed that Oracle laid off people with a mass email at 6 a.m. Like, that is just ruthless. And on top of that, college still does a terrible job at teaching actual financial literacy, which is kind of crazy when you think about how much money is involved that you're paying to go to college. And you do not learn the basics of financial literacy in return. Nobody in college is going to walk you through how to build a budget, how to invest, how to open up a Roth IRA. Those are the exact skills that are going to matter financially for you after graduation. So, the main takeaway here isn't that you have to follow my exact path to land a six-figure job out of college. It's just that you need to understand the trade offs with what job you take, what degree you choose, and make decisions with the long game in mind. Be willing and open to take those internships. Be willing to take a risk. Be willing to move. All of these stacked together are going to help you land a high paying job out of school. And I'll be real with you. Even after landing that six-figure job, I still had to put my head down and work for those first few years in order to get promoted and to keep progressing. And I'm still pushing for that next level up in my career. So none of this is about coasting. It's about building momentum and continuing to level up your financial life. And that's all I really have for this video. And I know this one's a bit longer than usual, and hopefully this can shed some light on how I got to where I am now, a little bit about my background. But as the channel's growing and we're getting close to the 800 subscriber mark, which is wild to think about, I felt like it was worth sitting down and actually walking you through my background and how I got into a higher paying role right out of school. If you guys made it all the way to the end of this video, you have an awesome attention span. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.